Imagine you just landed a new job. The benefits package includes a literal palace, custom silk robes, and an army of servants whose only job is to fan you with giant feathers. The catch? Your boss is an absolute monarch who can legally have you executed if you have a bad hair day. And your 3,000 coworkers are actively trying to slip mercury into your morning tea. Welcome to the ancient royal harem, a place modern television shows like a glamorous 24-hour spa getaway filled with romance, poetry, and beautiful lighting. In reality, being selected as an imperial concubine was basically entering hyper-bureaucratic corporate internship, where the human resources department was run by elderly eunuchs with clipboard mentalities and zero empathy. And the corporate ladder was covered in actual razor blades. Let us look at how you got the job in the first place. If you were a young woman living in the Ming or Qing dynasties or the Ottoman Empire, the recruitment process was not exactly an optional application process. It was more like a mandatory military draft, but for aesthetics. The Imperial scouts would roll into your province, round up every eligible teenager from a decent family, and begin a multi-stage screening process that would make a modern flight attendant interview look like a casual chat. First came the physical inspection. They did not just look to see if you were pretty. They checked your skin for moles, scars, or any texture that did not resemble a perfectly polished pearl. They measured your posture with literal wooden rulers to ensure your shoulders were perfectly symmetrical. They even made you walk back and forth in a straight line to see if your ankles made too much noise. If you sneezed, if your voice was a fraction of an octave too high, or if a disgruntled examiner decided your nose looked slightly too rebellious, you were disqualified and sent home. Which, by the way, was the best case scenario, because the few who made the cut did not win a fairy tale. They won an entry-level position at the bottom of a terrifyingly rigid corporate hierarchy. Take the Qing dynasty, for example. The internal palace structure was divided into 8 distinct ranks, functioning exactly like corporate titles. At the very top was the Empress, who was essentially the chief operating officer of the household. Beneath her were the noble consorts, the standard consorts, and all the way down to the bottom tier, the Daying, who were basically the unpaid interns of the palace world. Your rank dictated every single aspect of your daily existence with mathematical cruelty. The Imperial archives recorded exact daily allowances for every tier. If you were a top-rank consort, your daily budget included several pounds of fresh pork, a whole chicken, a duck, and a generous allocation of fine silk. If you were a bottom-rank Daying, your daily allowance looked like a depressing grocery list for a college student living in a studio apartment. You got a handful of vegetables, a tiny sliver of meat, and a strictly enforced limit on how many eggs you could consume per day. If you wanted an extra egg to make an omelet, you had to hope your supervisor was in a good mood. Otherwise, you were violating Imperial protocol, which was a great way to spend your next 3 months, doing forced laundry in the basement. And just like any modern corporate hierarchy, the perks only mattered if you could actually get FaceTime with the CEO. Which brings us to the absolute logistical nightmare of scheduling. With thousands of women living in the palace complex, the emperor did not just scroll through his contacts to see who was free on a Friday night. The system had to be managed with the terrifying efficiency of a shared Google Calendar. In the Chinese imperial court, this was handled through the green-headed name tags. During dinner, a chief eunuch would present the emperor with a large silver tray covered in green wooden tags, each bearing the name of a specific concubine. If the emperor was tired and wanted to scroll through his ancient equivalent of TikTok in peace, he would ignore the tray. But if he wanted company, he would flip one of the tags face down. The moment that tag flipped, an entire bureaucratic machine sprang into action. The chosen concubine did not get to put on a nice dress and walk over to the royal bedchamber. Instead, she was stripped completely naked, inspected for hidden weapons, wrapped tightly in a silk blanket, and carried through the freezing palace corridors on the back of a eunuch like a human burrito. This was not for romance. It was for security, ensuring you were not carrying a dagger to settle a grudge about your daily egg allowance. And the entire event was strictly timed. A eunuch would stand outside the door with a literal stopwatch, recording the exact hour and minute the encounter began and ended. If the session went on too long, the eunuch would loudly cough outside the window to remind the ruler that the empire had things to do. The details were logged into an official ledger to ensure that if a pregnancy occurred, the child's legitimacy could be mathematically verified by the accounting department. It is safe to say the mood was somewhat clinical. But managing the boss was nothing compared to managing your coworkers. Because inside the harem, every single woman was playing a zero-sum game where the currency was survival. If you did not have a child, your career was effectively over the moment you hit 30. If you did have a child, especially a son, you suddenly became a high-value target for every other ambitious person in the building. The internal politics made a toxic corporate Slack channel look like a peaceful meditation retreat. Since physical violence was strictly forbidden and heavily punished, the warfare was entirely psychological and chemical. You had to inspect your food every single morning to ensure the kitchen. Staff had not been bribed to mix lead or mercury into your soup. If a rival concubine sent you a beautiful, expensive gift of scented musk or cosmetics, it was rarely a gesture of friendship. It was usually an ancient abortifacient designed to ensure you suffered a sudden, tragic medical emergency before your pregnancy could threaten their position. You could trust absolutely no one, least of all the eunuchs who managed the hallways. They were the ultimate gatekeepers, controlling who got clean water, who got charcoal for their stoves in the winter, and whose letters actually reached the emperor's desk. If your family back home stopped sending bribes to the eunuch staff, your standard of living dropped faster than a tech stock in a recession. You would find yourself freezing in a damp room, staring at a blank wall, wondering if you should have just stayed in your village and married the local cabbage farmer. And even if you managed to navigate the toxic coworkers and the corrupt middle management, you still had to face the ultimate boss level: the mother-in-law. In the Ottoman Empire, this was the Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother. She was not just a retired relative living in the guest house. She was the absolute executive director of the Imperial harem, controlling a massive budget and possessing the legal authority to have any concubine reassigned, punished, or permanently removed from the premises if she felt her son was getting too distracted. To survive, you had to spend 80% of your energy laughing at her terrible jokes, and ensuring your posture was perfectly submissive every time she walked past your door. One wrong look, one sigh breathed too loudly during a mandatory tea ceremony, and you could find yourself packed into a leather sack and dropped into the Bosporus River under the cover of night. And what was the grand prize for surviving this decades-long gauntlet of poison politics? And extreme stress. The retirement plan, which, historically speaking, did not include a 401k or a nice condo in Florida. In the earlier eras of ancient history, when the ruler died, the retirement plan for his concubines frequently involved being buried alive alongside him so he would not get bored in the afterlife. Later dynasties realized this was bad for morale, so they upgraded the policy to a different kind of misery. When the emperor passed away, the entire harem was immediately evicted from the main palace to make room for the new ruler's staff. You were packed up and shipped off to a specialized retirement palace or a secluded convent, where you spent the rest of your life wearing gray robes, burning incense, and praying for the soul of the dead guy who couldn't remember your name anyway. You were completely cut off from the outside world, forbidden from remarriage, and left to fade into obscurity, while the next generation of teenagers arrived at the main gate to fight over their daily egg allowances. So the next time you sit at your modern office desk, looking at a mountain of emails and feeling like your soul is slowly leaving your body, just take a deep breath and look around. Your manager might be annoying, and your coworkers might steal your labeled lunch from the communal fridge. But at least no one is checking your skin for moles with a wooden ruler, wrapping you in a blanket like a burrito, or trying to slip heavy metals into your iced coffee. Probably. So what about you? Do you think you would have climbed the Imperial corporate ladder to the very top? Or would you have been fired and sent to the laundry department on day one? Let me know down in the comments.